Welcome everyone to the webinar this afternoon, or rather workshop. This is the fifth in the series of the ESPC campaign trainings that the Energy Services Coalition is assisting with. The focus of our workshop today is the performance period. So we're going to talk about the best practices for measuring the impact of ESPCs and how to ensure the success post-construction. And just FYI, I know many of you have joined before and have seen these resources, but a copy of these slides will be provided for you later. And we'll also have a recording of this that we can make accessible to you as participants in the campaign. So if you have colleagues that would benefit from this information, you'll have an opportunity to share it with them later if they're not able to join us live today. So Chris, if you can advance. So housekeeping. So if you have questions, you can always raise your hand or drop questions in the Q&A box. We'll make sure to get to any of those questions by the end of the call. If there's something that we're hitting on at the time and you need to ask a specific question, then we can certainly stop and address those. Excuse me. And you'll unmute your microphone to ask the question. You'll have the ability to do that on your own. Excuse me, we won't need to do that for you. And again, a recording of the training will be posted online minus Q&A. So don't worry if a question you ask, if you're concerned about that being memorialized, it won't be. This is more for the exchange today, but a recording of the training will be provided later. Next, Chris. You go. There we go. So our speakers today, I'm more the coordinator, Deb Taylor, Executive Director of the Energy Services Coalition, and joined by experts that are going to cover the topic today. Chris Halpin, who's been our lead trainer, will take over here in just a moment. Tracy Phillips, who should be joining us. If not, Chris can start his section, and then we'll come back to him. He's the EBO chair, IPMVP, which is all measurement verification related. He's also involved in PACE financing in Colorado and an engineer and a true expert on these issues. And then George Buchanan, certified energy manager, who's a DOE project facilitator, works with the customers, with the owners to ensure project success. So glad to have these professionals with practical experience joining us today. Go to the next slide, Chris. And it's the presenter bios. I won't read all of this. You'll have this as a record, but again, I kind of summarized this in their intro. But extensive experience with each of these three gentlemen in the area of ESPC performance verification and project oversight and management. So you'll be hearing today from folks that have practical experience in doing this type of work. Next.
Together, the four of us have over 100 years of experience.
Okay, that's yeah. Okay, so there you go, 100 years of experience.
That one. Oh my God, we're going to be old enough. We're just experienced.
And our role, again, the Energy Services Coalition, we're a national nonprofit comprised of public and private sector members working together to advance understanding and use of energy savings performance contracting as a building upgrade tool. And we are supporting the Department of Energy and the ESPC campaign, providing these trainings as well as direct technical support, which we'll cover toward the end, and make sure that you understand how to access that resource. This is provided through the campaign, and we'll close with that as well as sort of a final poll. So with that, Chris, I will turn my mic off and turn it over to you and our presenters, and we'll get into the substance now. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks, Dub. Really appreciate it. Been sort of a crazy time the past month or so, but we're pushing forward, still trying to get these trainings out there to make sure everybody who's interested can learn as much as they can about how to manage an energy savings performance contracting project as well as possible. All right, so we're going to get right into this. These are some of the acronyms you're going to see throughout the presentation. We have them Oops. Went backwards, sorry. We have them listed here so that if you need to go back and read through them, you have it here. Next, today, our objective today is really an overview of measurement and verification, or M&V, and how it's done in an energy savings performance, real best practices that we've seen developed over sort of the past 20, 25 years to ensure successful project outcomes for you. Because that's really at the heart of all of this. We want all of these things that we're teaching everybody to help you make sure your projects come out successfully, right? There's always going to be, horror stories out there of things that didn't go well, but there's, 98% of these projects turn out really, really well for most folks. So we've already done introductions. Going to go through what is performance contracting, sort of where are we in the whole process, review of the measurement verification process, how you apply the IPMVP, which is sort of like the gospel, if you will, of this business. It's the real heart of performance contracting and how projects are successful or not. And Tracy Phillips is going to be talking about that if he can make it. If not, I'm going to do those slides. And then George will be doing this examples of M&V best practices from actual real projects he's been working on in the Southeast. And then we'll go through some questions and discussion. Deb will be running a poll for us. And then we'll talk about some extra resources, some closing thoughts, and next steps. And as we go through here, like Deb said, if you have any questions, please just get them ready for the end, and we'd be more than happy to take them and answer as many as you like. And, we can stay over a little bit if needed to answer any additional questions. And you'll have my contact info at the end here. If anything comes up afterwards, please reach out. I'm more than happy to answer any follow-up questions you may have. So what is performance contracting, right? And many of you have probably sat through these trainings before, so I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but it's basically being able to take advantage of upgrading your facilities using tomorrow's energy savings today, right? Without tapping into your organization's capital budget, which we all know it's getting appropriated money is very tough these days, right? The economy has still never really fully recovered from the Great Recession 10, 12 years ago, and especially to trying to get capital in to do major infrastructure renewal in your facilities, it's very hard to come by. So using performance contracting and third-party financing, it really is a super tool. For me, it's like the best thing I have seen in the mush market for the almost 40 years I've been doing this. And from an investment point of view, these sort of investments can really provide you quite a return. Like, I've seen them 8 to 12% return, which is pretty much better than a 401k most years. With the risk of a T-bill, very little risk in these compared to done properly, right? Compared to your regular design bid build project, just guaranteed energy savings. So where were we in the process? So if you've been through any of these trainings before, we had a training on phase 1 and 2, one on phase 3, and phase 4. Right. And now we're talking about phase 5. And this is Department of Energy sort of 5-phase description of performance contracting. And it's separated out this way to break up sort of procurement, the development of the project, construction of the project, and then what we're calling the performance period. So that's basically once the project has been accepted by the owner and they start making the payments, then the S goes on the hook to make sure the equipment and systems are actually performing according to what was in the investment grade audit. So, and that's usually anywhere from 10 to 25, 30 years sometimes, right? So anyway, that's where we are in the process. And M&V is not like a checklist. It's sort of like commissioning done properly as a process, right? LEED certification is not a checklist. It's a process. M&V is very similar, right? You get the M&V developed during the IGA. M&V plan gets attached to the contract, and then the M&V activities get done during the IGA and the construction period, right? And then follow on annual M&V reports. And we'll go through all of this in detail. So that's sort of where we are in the process. Most of what we talked about with M&V has been done already in the previous trainings and workshops. And we're going to focus really on this phase 5 performance period. But I want to go through sort of high level discussion of what's next, right? So a review of the M&V process, right? So the first time we really talked about this in any detail um, was in our workshop in October of 24, reviewing the investment grade audits, selecting your M&V methods, determining key performance indicators, scheduling your M&V activities, and your commissioning plan and activities, right? And one thing we went over in a lot of detail then, we won't now, but commissioning and M&V are sort of linked, right? Commissioning is making sure the equipment that's getting put in is being run through its paces and operating properly, the way it was intended. And M&V is the energy savings that result from that equipment running properly and running the way it was intended, right? And the way it's being maintained the way it was intended to be as well, right? And owners reps, which you've heard me refer to this, multiple times. This is what I used to do for a living. Can really help you out in these cases, because this is a real specialty. M&V is one of these niches, and even if you have like a really good facilities person, a great team that's operating your facilities, most of them have no background in M&V, right? So it's good to get some extra outside help for this. So this is a slide from Department of Energy's Performance Contracting National Resource Center, or PCNRC, Training Certificate Series. This is an 8-module series that got developed over the past few years. I was lucky enough to help them develop this, did some mush market sort of QA audit, quality assurance for Department of Energy on it. And this is a slide that we used in this to sort of explain to owners and owners reps, when the ESCO is doing the investment grade audit, the ESCO has certain responsibilities and the customer has certain responsibilities, right? You're, as an owner, are going to be providing utility data, witnessing activities, and reviewing their M&V in the IGA. And the ESCOs, the bulk of the responsibility is on them. They're going to be estimating the scope, defining M&V, all that during the beginnings of the investment grade audit. Then as the sort of the investment grade audits getting further along, 50, 60%, they start developing the M&V plan along with the selection of what sorts of equipment are going to go in, right? Because you can't really design an M&V plan unless you know what equipment is going to be measured, right? Before and after. And then you're going to be reviewing and approving it. And then the two we're really going to focus on in the next few slides is the ESCO is finishing all the work and getting things commissioned. Before you accept the project, they're going to submit this report so you can review it. Your owner's rep can review it and make sure, yep, everything looks good. Looks like the savings should be occurring. We'll go ahead and accept the project instead of waiting a year to see if it happens or not. And then they start doing their annual M&V reports after that. So the first type of M&V report, like you heard me say a few minutes ago, is the commissioning report. All right. This is closely related, like I said, verifying the equipment, and these functional performance tests are really there to make sure that how these things were designed is met during construction and implementation. Then this post-installation, what we call year zero M&V report. Like I said, it's right before acceptance. So this is sort of the last point we really have leverage with the ESCO to make sure this stuff is actually working and hopefully going to be delivering the savings to you, right? This is your, right? So it's the last chance. You have to really make sure these things are working well before it gets into the performance period. Then the annual M&V report, and this is something that's done according to the contract. So when you get this contract developed, the annual M&V report becomes, and the annual M&V report is described in detail in the M&V plan. And there should be a template that's in that contract that shows here's how the ESCO needs to develop that report and how you should be reviewing it, right? So the first step that happens when an ESCO does this is go back and then you go through from there, right? And it's really verifying the savings were achieved. First, verifying the equipment was installed the way it was supposed to, see if it's being operated and maintained the way it was supposed to. So if your folks on the owner side are supposed to be maintaining this equipment, then the ESCO's sure everybody's on the same page with that. And that is absolutely key. That is the one major point of failure I've seen in projects that don't succeed is miscommunication between the owner and the ESCO and who's operating, maintaining that equipment, right? That's the number one cause of problems. So as long as that's handled well during the development process and gets into the construction process, you usually sail right through construction into the performance period. And it's important that your people take part in this process, right? Both during the investment grade audit and during these annual M&V report reviews. When the ESCOs come on site, make sure your folks are walking them through these buildings, they're seeing what they're doing. So when the report gets submitted, they have some knowledge of what had gone on during that report development. And this usually happens, it depends on the state. And some states, they require it every year for the term of the agreement. Some states, it's only a year to 5 years, right? We find that, first 2 to 3 years are probably the most important to make sure that things are actually working. Usually by then, all the kinks have been worked out of the project with controls and chillers and this and that. So anyway, we're not going to go through that in more detail, but if you want to, you can go back to one of the previous trainings. We have them all up on YouTube on the ESPC campaign channel, and we spent maybe a half hour talking about this kind of stuff. So let's see if Tracy is able to join. He had a doctor's appointment to go to, and I haven't heard from him. So I'll go right through this then. Actually, I'm going to turn my phone off. So unfortunately, Tracy is not able to make it, but Tracy is the chair of the Efficiency Evaluation Organization's IPMVP Committee. So he and his committee basically came up with these rules originally, and they maintain them and improve them over time. And we're going to talk about that some more in a little while. So the benefits of an M&V plan, I already talked about this somewhat previously, but it's the first and most important thing is a measurement verification plan is your physical manifestation of risk management in a performance contract, right? Your owner's rep can really act as your risk manager, but this M&V plan is the one thing you have to go back to the ESCO and say, hey, this is what we all agreed to. We need to be doing what we agreed to. You need to be doing what you agreed to so that the project actually gets implemented the way it was supposed to, the way everyone understood, and how expectations are going to be met. And then how are you going to measure those expectations over time, right? And limiting uncertainty is the most important thing about any of this, right? And because once you replace equipment, you can't go back and measure what things were in the past, right? So the only way to limit that uncertainty is to make sure that things get agreed to early on, measurements get done beforehand, measurements get done afterwards, right? It allocates the risk appropriately, right? The ESCO is not responsible for weather. It's not responsible for you, say you have a school or a high school and you're adding volleyball and basketball leagues all winter, and that's after the project was already implemented. They can't be responsible for, the heating bill going up, right? For example. So it's a lot of things like this that really appropriates the risk between the different parties. It identifies O&M issues so that if you're going to take out, rooftop units within there for 30 years and replace them with a brand new chiller plant that your folks have no experience running, right? You're going to want to make sure that maybe the ESCO gets hired to maintain that equipment for the first 5 years while you get people hired on to be able to learn how to run that equipment, right? So all those sorts of things can get handled in this M&V plan. And then the O&M plan, that's part of the audit. It safeguards you against future audits, right? And this isn't as big a deal in the MUSH market. This was a really big deal when I did a lot of work in the federal market because you had the Inspector General's office, Government Accounting Office going out and auditing ESPC contracts every few years. But it's really good to have so that you have a record of all this for posterity. And you've heard me talk about eProject Express. This is one of the best uses of eProject Express is getting your whole investment grade audit, all these documents, including the M&V plan, uploaded into that platform so that everyone knows where to find it. It also helps you demonstrate performance to external stakeholders because, if you're the project champion and you and your team know all about this, your CFO or the mayor, whoever is not going to know hardly anything about this, but you can use the M&V plan to demonstrate successes and performance to those folks, the external stakeholders or, taxpayers, whoever it might be. And it shows a lot of good progress with your community, financial responsibility, so on and so forth. And it really supports the success of your overall ESPC program. If you can show year after year that this is really working and you want to do a follow-up project, it really makes it a lot easier. And I did this, years ago for a city here in Nevada where we started with 12 buildings and that went so well. 1 year later, the mayor was like, just do the rest of the buildings, another 50 buildings, right? So it really helps the organizations get these things done. It's really helpful to understand the cost of M&V, right, compared to the risks. You don't want to spend, millions of dollars measuring things, right, because it's going to dilute your savings. We typically see, on average, 1 to 5% of the savings. If it's a simple lighting replacement, 1%. If it's a complex chiller plant replacement, boilers, so on and so forth, controls, it starts to climb a little bit further. And we'll talk more about which types of M&V options you're going to choose for that. So there's 4 different methods in the IPMVP. 2 of them based on retrofit isolation. So that's basically taking, say, lighting and motors. And because you can isolate those, right, you can count, 4 fixtures in a room and go to the panel and actually put a meter on those. Or you can put a meter on the disconnect for your motor and see how much electricity it's actually using versus a whole facility. If you put, a bunch of different measures in place, you can't just go to the meter and look at that, right? It's or individually at the panel and look at that. It has to be done in a whole building. And IPMVP is giving you 2 ways to do each method. So option A, which we'll talk about this in some more detail later, is measuring like a key parameter or 2 one time, right? Option B is all parameter measurement over time, right? Whole facility is option C, where they basically take all the utility bills over however many years it's in the baseline, and then take your utility bills going forward and use very complicated math called linear regression analysis, basically an algorithm, just like everyone knows about algorithms and AI now. That's been getting done for decades through this option C. And option D is very similar, except using an energy simulation model that gets calibrated with the actual utility data over time. So these 4 options each have, pros and cons, right? Option A is used for short or long term. The usage, like hours, for an example, can be measured or agreed upon. The calculations are typically used in spreadsheets for it. And the cost is low, right? I developed this a while ago using sort of what you see on Yelp for the prices of restaurants. Everyone understands it, 1 through 4 or 1 through 3 dollar signs. And typically it's going for lighting, motors, water, whatever. Option B is where you're doing like chiller replacements or solar. You're going to put several meters on it and measure it for quite a while, right? You're going to measure it for weeks or months during the IGA and maybe even permanently over time, right? Whole facility measurement, like I said, this option C, you're going to look at all your utility bills, electricity, power, so on and so forth. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Now I'm getting messages that it's choppy. If it's okay,
Yeah,
let me know.
Chris,
Okay.
your audio kind of slows down and speeds back up. I'm getting
It
everything,
does.
but just it is a little bit choppy. So just
Okay.
FYI.
All right. I don't know what's going on with this internet. So the option C, whole facility measurement, it's primarily used in deep retrofits. Like if you're doing 10 measures across your building or your whole complex, that's when option C is super, super helpful. It makes it's a lot easier than trying to measure a bunch of individual energy conservation measures or ECMs. And same thing with this calibrated computer simulation. This is rarely used. But what's coming with AI, again, and I don't know a whole lot about it yet, but that is going to revolutionize this because you'll have these AI engines probably able to do virtually all of this. And we don't know how that's all going to work yet, but it's coming, as you can imagine, with so many parts of life. So the best applications of these. So if you're going to have a project or a measure inside your project that's the savings are not worth a lot, option A is great. All right, you're gonna replace, water conservation measures, right? Replace faucets and this and that. And it's not a lot of money. You're not going to spend a lot of money measuring it. Option A is great. Or if the contractor is not responsible for all the parameters affecting energy consumption, like, weather, occupancy, and so on and so forth, option A is really good for that too. And if it's something you're able to assume, something that's with a level of certainty that it's acceptable to everybody involved, option A makes the most sense as well. And if ongoing measurement isn't required, like lighting is a great example. When you take out a 25-watt compact fluorescent lamp and you put in, say, a 10 LED, that 10 LED is always going to draw 10 watts, regardless of how old it's or anything. And the operators may vary over time, but if you can agree to them early on, right? This room operates 8 hours a day, 260 days a year, plus or minus 5%. That's close enough. Option A is just fine for that, right? And that's is typically done. But afterwards, ESCO is going to come out early and make sure that, yep, those classroom figures are still there, right? They didn't get down during a run or whatever, which happens sometimes, right? And usually, if you're on the owner's side and you're going to have something renovated, building replaced, adding on, you want to let your ESCO know that early as possible, so there's no surprises. With option B, this is for more complicated measures where you can still isolate the energy use. Like I said, chiller in a chiller plant, you can put like a BTU meter on it and a KW on it and see exactly how much energy that chiller is using. But the loads can vary, right? Summer, cool summer, warm winter, cool winter, boiler, so on and so forth. And the ESCO is responsible for the operations, for the performance of that equipment. They have designed and installed a chiller plant, for example, and the chiller's got, an efficiency rating that varies according to load. You want to measure that and see if it's actually performing. It was described to by contract in the services agreement or the ESPC agreement. And on measurement really helps to verify that this is number one remaining, like I said, like with the lighting, but it's even more important with a lot like a chiller plant or solar panels, and that the savings over time, right? Because a lot of this equipment that has a lot of moving parts, like a control system, there's boilers, depending on how the operation goes, that can really change over time. I've seen like set points, whole systems where there's an event on a Saturday night and the maintenance guy goes in there and changes the schedule, then forgets to change back. So every Saturday night, the aquarium is set to 70 degrees when it could be at 80 degrees because nobody's there all weekend, right? So that's just, you want to make sure it gets done over time and be as perfect application of that. And then metering gets installed for a lot of this stuff. So the whole facility, that's if we're going to do very comprehensive measures that are saving, 20, 30%. I've seen even as high as 40%. If you have a lot of energy conservation with potential interactive effects, like changing out the lighting, which reduces your HVAC load, and you put in new cooling systems and you put new controls in to all of this, that's very difficult to calculate and to keep track of rather, without you having long-term evaluation of this. And option C is a great way to do that. Also, if you have soft savings, like you're doing door sweep and caulking on windows and that sort of thing, it's almost impossible to measure that. You just throw that with the option C and take a look and do the linear regression analysis. So the ESCO does a linear regression analysis for. Then option D, like I said, this is so rare used. It's an energy model based one. We use like a DOE model, Energy Plus, which is software out there. It's helpful for new construction. And most people don't know, but depending on the state you're in, you can use ESP new construction, which is wonderful. You can peel out some of the mechanical, electrical stuff that you probably don't have the money to pay for the higher grade equipment anyway. You performance contract to fund that piece of the project. And you can use option E because you don't have a baseline. You don't know how much energy is going to be used by that building unless you model it and do a really quality model. And then you can calibrate actual energy data, the fact when it's built.
Chris, we're still seeing the option C
So
slide.
during the performance period, right? And that's, a lot of information on how this is developed, but this is really all up to this performance period, right? So they're stipulated or deemed safe. Are you? Okay. I don't know what is going on. Has it gotten there yet?
Still seeing option C. It looks like it's trying to change right
Can
now.
you hear me okay?
Yeah, now we can see option D.
Still seeing option C.
No, we see option D now.
Has it moved?
Yes.
You see, okay, all right. I may just unplug this. Okay, so you see the as practices and performance period. You do? Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. I don't know what's going on with this. Has it gone to the next slide, M&V best practices?
Not yet. Still option D. Yeah, keep going. I think it'll catch up.
Plugged it back in. Okay. Is that C or is it moved?
Still see option D displayed.
Okay, I guess I'll just keep going. Something wrong with the still something Z? Man, I do not understand this. Okay, well, I'll keep going because we're already. All right.
We're on the M&V best practices slide
Sorry
down.
about this, folks. I don't know what's going on at the end. This only happens when I'm doing this, of course. It never happens when I'm not running a webinar. So during the you are? Okay, good. I apologize. What's going on? Anyways, we used to see that not as much anymore, but stipulated or savings used to be used a lot in industry, right? It's really come a long way in the past years with really getting used with these maybe options A, B, C, D, right? Because deemed or stipulated savings is not an option, right? There's no option E in this protocol, right? And all that really is an agreement that no real M&V is going to get done, right? May be fine for minor things, especially if it's like an operating savings, but it's usually not a very good idea, especially these days when the technology is here to measure virtually anything that you're doing, right? So one of the other best practices making adjustments to the based on post retrofit conditions. There's the routine ones and non-routine. Routine is like weather changes, right? That every year, the was going to take a look at, look at data. How hot was the summer? How did the chiller plant perform during the hot summer? And uh, um, reconcile that. What's not showing lots of extra savings, right? Ran more, so there's more savings. Bills went higher, and so on and so forth. A non-routine are things, or something changed in the facility, right? For whatever there is, or the facility got closed for the summer. This sometimes happens with schools, Aspire during the development period. That school was used for summer school, right, and not used for summer school performance period, or vice versa, right? And all of a sudden you see, all the things, and especially in a warm climate, it can make a huge difference. And one of the things that it tries to do is account for savings lost due to schedule change. And people have the misperception that with measurification, they think they should be able to see the exact things that's in that audit in the utility bills, right? That's never going to happen, right? That's why we do M&V in a lot of detail. You can see what expectations are, but how they actually get measured, regardless of what the weather is like or occupancy profile, how it is over time, right? So it's really important to understand that. And these M&V reports are the key to do that, right? And I know George is going to talk some more about what actions in the field for these, but it's very important to understand that you can't just look at your bills and expect to see this that you were promised, right? You have to have real M&V done, knowing that there's things that affect that you have no control of, but that your ESCO, your owner's rep, can help reconcile for you. So speaking of owner's rep, so this is one thing that Tracy had brought up. Hiring owner's rep to examine annual M&V reports is super helpful. And the timing couldn't be better. Last month, EV came out with this and energy performance tracking for facility owners. I haven't really read it yet. I can't wait to read it, because this thing that's really been missing in the industry, where you needed to have experts really sort of explain all of this to an owner in detail, and sort of handhold owners all the way through the process, right? Because this, like I said, this is a real niche. It's very technical, very nichey practice. So now they have this guide to help folks like you, which I think an owner's rep is still going to be super helpful for some other reasons, which I talked about in previous trainings. But making sure that you have an independent expert reviewing this, that are the crux of your project, right? This is one of the things that makes us much different than normal design, bid, build, is the M&V. And again, I know I say this every time I get on one of these training sessions, but it's the most important thing about all of this to me. One of the things that's most important about this is to review the verified saving calculations, right? It's giving you spreadsheets. Make sure someone is in there reviewing those spreadsheets in detail, and it needs to be live spreadsheets. You may have heard me say before, not PDFs of spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets with the formula, so you can check, yep, A times B is A, all right? And all getting summed to make sure that savings you're expecting in the M&V plan gets summed up to the executive summary of your annual M&V report, right? So we have a link at the very end to guide that you'll be able to click on when you get the copies report, excuse me, of this slide deck. So I'm going to turn it over to George now to go through some M&V practices in real projects that he has been working on. George, you are on.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm George Buchanan. As mentioned before, the slides will be available, so there's all my fun bios.
George, can you hear us? There we go.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, George, you're coming through loud and clear.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and advance the slides a couple. I'll go ahead and tear right into it.
I can hear you, yes.
George, tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and advance these.
I've advanced it to the performance period municipal facilities. Can you see that?
Okay.
You want to take over?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George. Yep.
Okay,
Chris,
I'll
you may
stop sharing, and you
yeah, you may kill your video to see if that helps with the bandwidth, and I'll just advance the slides. So
sounds great. Thanks, Doug.
Yep.
So I'll go through a couple projects here. I'll be brief. If there are more questions, we're happy to answer them, as Chris mentioned. I think contact information will be up there. Of course, the slide deck will be shared with the attendees. So this, what I'm going to talk about now is the city of Atlanta, obviously a capital city here in the Southeast. And I've focused on the large buildings, large downtown buildings that they put in one of their 5 ESPC portfolio sets of projects. And the reason I've included these, I mean, it all scales. And so I want to talk about some examples in actual performance period, as well as some M&B best practices, just what we're here talking about this afternoon. So you can see here lots of square footage across these buildings. And along the bottom, you see the ECMs that were included. Now, there are 9 projects here out of 22 discovered by the presented by the ESCO, and these are the projects the city went with. You see them here across the matrix, right? So different buildings got different ECMs. A couple of things going on with this project. One, these are old buildings, they're large buildings. Some are connected and had shared utility meters. So baseline development was really a challenge for the ESCO to really isolate what consumption belonged where, belonged to what building. So across this list of measures, you see this blend. I mean, we hear the term low-hanging fruit. I don't think that's a good term, but that's just me. So a combination of those quick payback or fund generating measures, some measures that, you know, the city just needed to have done in order to, you know, maintain strong operation of the equipment in these buildings. And finally, there were some capital intensive measures, right? I mean, look at chiller replacements, for example, think of it that way. So if you go on, Dub, here in the construction period, what did we find? We found that the ESCO presented, well, before they presented, you see, Chris was just speaking about IPMVP options. You see most all of the project was done under option A. And so you may have situations where there are different M&B approaches done on a per building basis. That wasn't the case here. Almost everything was option A. And in this case, lighting was the only ECM that was option B, but it was actually option A, right? I mean, Chris was describing option B for us as continuous measurement of parameters over time. Well, the ESCO in this case had some short-term measurements on the burn hours for lighting, but they didn't do much in the construction period in terms of measuring burn hours. So it's really an option A. They label it option B, you know, it went forward. So here, let's see, option B. So the savings during the construction period, as reported by the ESCO, you see in these 3 tables along the bottom and on the right-hand side. And these are your grouped energy conservation measures, right? So you've got your lighting retrofit in the top right-hand side, top right, the water conservation project in the bottom right, and of course, cooling tower submetering. What that involves is you know, water utilities, look, it's a gallon in, it's a gallon out. There's water rate charge, and then sewer rate charge. Well, the water utility says, well, listen, if you can prove that you're just evaporating that water, we won't charge you the sewer cost for it. Put a sewer rate on there. So that's where the savings are here. Not going too deep into it here, but for example, you see in the bottom right in the water conservation, there is an impact to heating the hot water used in those buildings. So not only do you have water sewer consumption savings, you're also going to have a rate savings as well. And then lighting, of course, is what it is. Now, again, these are the savings reported by the ESCO during the construction phase or construction period. You see, you know, taken together, these are some pretty impressive numbers. Moving on to the next slide here, we see that the decentralized measures, if you will, had quite, you know, painted a bit of a different picture. You know, it's a pretty busy slide here, but then there's lots of data in the different ECMs, how they performed during the construction period. Now, you would expect to see numbers like this come in lower because these are your more capital intensive measures. They took longer to implement, right? I mean, I think the chiller replacement at City Hall, for example, in the top right, that was the last measure to be completed because it was such a heavy lift. Okay, so now the ESCO reported all of this, and as part of the analysis, if you go on to the next slide, what did we find here in our analysis? Well, we found that we didn't necessarily agree with the reported construction period savings. In fact, we recommend the city recognize about half of what was reported. So just quick example, the cooling tower submetering project, right? So the water utility says, okay, yeah, we'll give you that credit, but you need to prove 12 months of data to show that it's valid. Now, during the construction period, it was 12 months itself. So there weren't 12 months of available data for that reporting. The ESCO is very happy to report those numbers, but sort of there was some verification that needed to happen and that we were able to find here. In addition, some of the mechanical measures on the slide with all the decentralized measures, right? There were ongoing equipment challenges and operating challenges with that equipment that meant that savings, of course, weren't being achieved. The equipment's not doing what everybody thinks it's supposed to be doing. So here, just some best practices on sort of a what to avoid concept here. Just look into your baseline. That is, if you were to separate the investment grade energy audit into phases, for example, you've got your baseline development as that first phase of the IGA. So critically important to dig into everything that's being presented. During the guarantee period, where you see inconsistencies in reported use, this is a matter of data clarity, garbage in, garbage out. You need to share information with the ESCO, particularly I mentioned on the O&M side where some of the measures weren't performing as they were intended to. Finally, a mismatch between calculated and or reported savings. Some of the measures came with an operational savings component. Chris alluded to this, where we agree, we call it a stipulated savings on operational cost savings. So our recommendation is always to only allow operational savings when you're going to, cancel a third-party service contract because you're getting a new piece of equipment. Well, until that third-party service contract is actually canceled, there's no real savings. So that's just as an example. All right, so let's look at another example here, this time in a municipal utility. Same City of Atlanta, Department of Watershed Management operates several water treatment facilities and what we now call water reclamation centers or facilities. We don't call them sewer plants anymore because I guess that's just not an attractive term. But this particular project focused on the RM Clayton Water Reclamation Center. It's one of the largest wastewater facilities in the Southeast. You see some of the characteristics there on annual consumption. And what this project really focused in on was the sludge management piece, right? So you see what we consider a baseline there on the bottom of some really hefty numbers spent by the city on an annual basis to move wet and dry tons off of the plant, tons of sludge, to incinerate. Had this really old incinerator where you incinerate the sludge, it turns into ash. You still got to take that to the landfill. Some of you in the municipal space, you may hear your folks on the water utility side talking about changing landfill requirements, the inability now to landfill sludge at the local landfill. Folks are trucking this stuff across multiple state lines to get rid of it. And so sludge management for the city of Atlanta, like many water utilities, pretty big deal. So going on to the next slide, after the ECMs were implemented, this involved the installation of a sludge drying plant. There you see it there on the screen under construction, where now all of this wet tons of sludge is going to be dried, and we create these little pellets. and dramatically reduce the cost of landfilling the material. So this was a pretty big project. It was about $77 million between the ultraviolet disinfection system and this new sludge drying plant. Ultraviolet UV disinfection is just, part of the process in wastewater treatment. Actually, the last step before dumping the effluent, it's called, back into, a local water source or whatnot. So here you see some of the numbers, and you'll notice here in this project, and this can happen, right, where a new system is installed, electricity costs, natural gas costs actually increase. So we see these negative numbers across the top there, meaning that the new system was a drag on the city's utilities, right? More natural gas costs, more electricity costs, but a significant offset in operation and maintenance cost. This was taken in a 2016, 2017 baseline, where those costs now are dramatically higher. And so the city is saving much more money through the ability to have this system in operation. Let's see, on the UV disinfection system, I mean, it performed as expected. Some of the old technology out there had sort of an inability to ramp up or dial back the intensity of these bulbs. They're really high energy users. And so moving that to really just the current state of technology was important. Not so much on the M&V side, but just the practicality side of ECMs, right? A water utility, they're only going to go so far into what might be called cutting edge, because their main focus is providing clean, safe drinking water, capturing wastewater and treating it effectively. That process, as some of you well know, is heavily governed by your local environmental protection agency or division or district or whatever it's called in your locality. So what did we find? On the next slide here. All right, so the ESCO had to make a lot of assumptions, right? The UV system, yeah, they were able to calculate savings and it was within reason, but they had to go back to a lot of baseline data because the city wasn't necessarily timely handing over information. So, as you are preparing your contract, your project, make sure you've got the means to, continuously transmit data, and that's not going to get, sort of lost in the shuffle. On the equipment functionality side, particularly with the sludge drying plant, we saw operational issues and deficiencies. But it's this thing, like we say, the ESCO is creating the condition for you to achieve savings to operate under this new, more efficient, more beneficial standard practice. It is, of course, up to you to maintain the equipment as prescribed, to operate the equipment as prescribed, do your PMs and so on. See here, lack of proper maintenance, where systems are falling in and out of operation. The way the contracts are going to be written, the ESCO is going to be able to say, well, look, I've satisfied the conditions of my guarantee. The reason this isn't performing is because you're not doing your part. And that stuff's going to be spelled out in the contract. All right, so finally, we consider, refining your maintenance tracking system. If you don't have a standardized practice or standardized process for maintenance tracking, consider that either as part of or before your performance contract. Just like I was mentioning, do your part to maintain the equipment. Make sure that, again, any repairs, replacements, PMs, and all that stuff are done. And on the training side, maybe not so surprising. Look, we have all this training. We invite everybody. We encourage everybody to come. But oh my gosh, there's a fire on the other side of the city. Oh, well, not literally fire, but some emergency or what have you. So folks are sort of in and out of the training, but it's critical that everybody attend these trainings, make the time for it, create the videos, ESCOs, they might not be happy to do it, but they will do it. This isn't this is a non-exhaustive list. There are plenty of other best practices that I know the DOE resources have available. It was mentioned eProject Express is a great tool for building up your baselines, being able to report those savings and keep all the stakeholders aware of everything that's going on. So hopefully, going through that and provide a little bit of context on some best practices. I'll turn it back over to Doug.
Great. Thank you, George. And we're going to advance to kind of wrap up here. And Chris, are you back with us?
I am back. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Yes.
All right. It's a momentary lapse of reason.
Here we go. All good now. Yeah.
All right. So I put together this list of questions. Do we have any questions from anybody in the audience so far?
Not seeing any, so maybe just kind of run through these as issues that they should consider.
No problem. And has Tracy joined? I saw that he got back. I don't know if he's actually joined.
Don't see Tracy
Okay.
on.
Doesn't look like it. Okay. So one of the ones that I'd put up here is, should I hire an owner's rep to review the annual M&V report submitted by the ESCO? And back during the beginning of me making you drink from a fire hose at the beginning of the presentation, I said that yes, an owner's rep can really help, right? And George mentioned it as well, can really help you with both the post-installation M&V report, I mean, the M&V plan, of course, during the project development, but that post-installation M&V report and then these annual M&V reports to make sure that, everything the ESCO is saying in those reports makes sense and is accurate and is reasonable, right? And it really helps you because, you're going to be making these payments every year to the financier for the term of the contract. You want to try to make sure that the savings are there, right? Because when you actually go to get payments made and you get this deal set up, typically your budget people are taking money out of your utility budget and putting it into, pay off the note line item in the budget, right? So you want to try to make sure that's all working. George, you want to add anything to that? Being a full-time owner's rep?
Are you giving me the opportunity to recommend that people hires? I mean, look, so, quickly, we talk about all the technical elements of performance contracts. And yes, you've got to keep track of all these moving parts all throughout your project. But I think it's important to remember that these are impacts to people who use your facilities, people who work in your facilities, the elected officials governing your facilities. And so someone to help with this change management, I mean, a theme of the slides I was going through was, what happens after, how do you avoid falling into some of these pitfalls?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to bring everybody along, and change management is a huge part of what an owner's rep, I think, should be doing.
Yep. Well said. Well said. And you know what? I worked for an ESCO back in the 90s doing this, and I wish there was more folks that were out there independently to help develop these projects on owners' behalves, because we had deals that just fell apart on us because the owner wasn't really sure, and it was a big risk for them. And we, as the ESCO, there's only so much you can say as an ESCO, right? You're the salesperson, and great deals fell apart, right? And there's no need for that today because there's a lot of folks out there that can help you. So how much does it cost for an ESCO to provide an annual savings guarantee and an M&V report? You want to talk to that, George?
It's going to vary wildly. I mean, Chris, you were through and talking about some of the M&V options. I mean, some are going to be more expensive than the others. Some are wrapped up as part of construction. So, I mean, gosh, trying to peg a percentage on the cost of it.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I've seen most deals that I've worked on over the years, the cost that the ESCO puts forward to do this annual M&V report, small, say less than $10 million projects, $5 million projects, $3 million projects, it's 20, 30, 40 grand, a year. Not a lot considering probably the amount of savings that are at stake here on large complex projects. Some of the, the military ones I've done, state university, 40, 50, 100, $200 million projects. It's $50 to $100,000 a year, which to some folks, I'm like, oh my God, what could we do with that money? What else could we do with that money? But boy, if you have a new CFO who comes in 2 years after this project is done, and like, what am I making this $1 million a year payment for? Well, here's this annual M&V report that's showing you exactly why, right? And I have found that exact instance multiple times because there's always turnover, right? Especially these days, lots of turnover in the public space. So it's a great sort of an insurance program for you to not only insurance to make sure your savings are going to be there, but to show your stakeholders, internal and external, that this is actually still a good investment because we're seeing the results of what we paid for originally. But that's one of the things that comes into play when you're doing a development of the project. And the ESCO's cash flow, they're going to have an estimate, a price, fixed price of how much it's going to cost on an annual basis to do the annual M&V report. So you'll know what to expect and you can budget that in. And it all gets paid for by the savings anyway over time. And then this next one, how many years should I pay for an M&V report? You may have heard me say earlier, depending on the state, like in North Carolina, some other states, they require an annual M&V report for the term of the contract, right? Which I think in general is a great idea. That's what the Department of Energy does, USDOE, who's hosting this. The military does, Army, Navy, Air Force, all require annual M&V reports. So if there is no requirement, I think 2 to 5 years is probably realistic for most deals. Again, it depends on the complexity and it depends on sort of how dynamic these facilities are. If these are office buildings that don't really change much every year, couple of years, you're probably fine. If it's like these sanitation buildings and water buildings and treatment buildings, like George was saying, and I worked on a huge one in LA, every year they're doing major construction on these facilities, right? Which is, can wreak havoc with your savings report. So it's good to, I think, big projects, especially ones that have a lot of public view, it's worth it to have somebody keep an eye on this every year. See, we have a question from Miracle. What are your thoughts on agencies stopping M&V reports? Could see the benefits in the first probably couple of years and don't see need for more M&V reports. George, you want to answer that, or you want?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you'd mentioned 2 to 5 years. I'd say that's reasonable. Depending on the type of project that you've done, after again 3-ish years of positive performance, everything is going well. I wouldn't see any problem stopping the M&V reports and just knowing that the projects are performing, because Miracle, we had this conversation, some of these smaller jurisdictions, I mean, yeah, it's not a bunch. $20,000 to $50,000 might seem like much, but to them it is, and they'd rather have those funds back. So I'd say 2 to 5 year window is fine.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think if there's a lot of different reasons why people do performance contracts, right? A lot of them, to be honest, we have old stuff that just needs to be replaced, right? Stuff that needs to be fixed, huge deferred maintenance backlog. That's one of the other, big problems. And it's not always really about the savings. It's about the repair and replacement of equipment. The savings are great. But if that's really the driving force behind it, yes, a couple of years of M&V is great. If this is being driven for financial reasons, right? We want to be able to, yes, we're going to get all these equipment replacements, improve the performance, make it a healthier, more comfortable place to live and work and learn and heal or whatever. That's wonderful. But they want to see where that money's being spent every year, right? And for me, it kind of depends on who is driving the ship with one of these things. And in that case, and if it's politically driven too, we're doing this for this town, the school district, because we want to look great to the public, whatever the case may be. It's nice to have that M&V report. You can go back to every year and go, see, that big investment we made a few years ago, it's still working for you, right? So that I think is helpful. So hopefully that answered your question. I put this last one in here. Are implementing building analytics in an ESPC project helpful for measurement verification of savings? So this is an interesting topic that we don't have time to get into, but building analytics is basically applying outside, more or less artificial intelligence. It's machine learning, right, on your facilities remotely to see, is everything really working the way it's supposed to? Are alarms going off? Are things getting treated properly, and so on and so forth? So it's made huge strides in the past few years. And if you want to talk some more about it, just, shoot me an email. But I think this is going to be the key to M&V in the future, using building analytics instead of sending engineers out to, hold fluke meters in their hand at your panels, right? That can all be done remotely these days.
Yeah,
All right.
let me chime in there.
Yeah.
Depending on the level of sophistication of your team, right? I mean, we all
Correct.
went through
Yeah.
the Internet of Things. I swear I gagged a little every time I heard the phrase. It got so horrible. Because we have mountains and mountains and mountains of data, but no one's doing anything with it. So
Right.
building analytics are a fantastic idea, provided you've got the infrastructure to handle what the data is telling you and then act on it accordingly, right? I mean, if you're taking phone calls and doing your work orders on a little field notepad and just doing it that way, you need to keep doing that. Don't try to put in something that's just not gonna have any real long-term value.
Yep. Unless you have like an HVAC tech who is like a coder and is part-time, really loves that kind of stuff.
Wow.
That's the kind of person you want, right? But anyway, yeah, so it's an interesting topic. Do we have any more questions? Thank you, Miracle, for your question. Any others? Okay. All right, let's move on then. Next slide. Okay. All right, Dub, this is your poll.
Yeah, thanks.
So
We'll just leave this poll up, but if there are just some feedback on this training and try to help inform future trainings to make them more valuable to you, please fill out the questions and we'll leave that up, and we'll just keep going to the next slide while we leave that up.
Okay, great. All right, so the resources that are available. So the Department of Energy Better Buildings program has got a wealth of resources. And I'm still learning about some of them, and I've been in this business for decades. This ESPC toolkit is super helpful for anybody who wants to learn more about how to do a performance contract. As part of that, there's evaluating ESPC results. So it's sort of a whole guide on how to go through and really look at this stuff in some more detail. There was a great thing done by Oak Ridge National Laboratory a while back, the business case for conducting M&V in state and local government ESPC projects. Again, super helpful that you can sit on your own time when you have some spare time and read through these things and really educate yourself some more on some of these details. Then this Performance Contracting National Resource Center that I talked about earlier. This is a hub for ESPC resources. It gives you legislation by state, all the ESPC enabling legislation, state energy office contacts rather, and trainings. And it's one thing if you're on this call and are not familiar with your state energy office, please get in contact with them, right? They on an individual basis have a load of information that can be helpful to you, depending on the state and their investment in performance contracting. And then trainings, right? There's a lot of training available in this PCNRC, including one that we mentioned earlier is meant for owners reps. It's an 8-module thing, but it's super helpful for anybody who wants to do a project like this. And if you happen to be a licensed professional and need to get continuing education hours, you get the CEUs or PDHs from this training certificate series I mentioned earlier. And then the M&V guidelines, we talked about that before for performance-based contracts. And then written guides and reports. These are the two I talked about that Tracy Phillips was involved in developing. And this last one is the one for facility owners that just came out last month. All right, next slide, Deb, thanks. All right. also got a ton of resources, right? And it's just about a year old now. We've developed a lot of resources due to Laura Carpenter's wonderful leadership in this. And it's really supporting the use of performance contracting to increase efficiency, modernize buildings, reduce expenses, increase resilience, and lead by example goals. A lot of practical resources in here. There's a whole amplification toolkit that has got a lot of stuff in there that's really helpful to have you spread the word to other folks inside your organization and outside your organization, and can really help demonstrate impact. Like I said, for me, this is the best tool I've ever seen for mush market folks. And I've been doing this, for 40 years and done well. It's the best thing I've seen out there to help you achieve your goals. And it really can help you showcase achievements, right? If you have facilities group who really are good at what they do, facilities groups rarely get any sort of PR for what they do. They're sort of an underrepresented and underappreciated often. This is a way to showcase their achievements, which I think is a fabulous thing. We have a lot of trainings, webinars, peer exchanges. This Ask an Expert office hours, I'll talk about some more in a minute. So if you haven't joined, please join. We'd love to have you on a team here. You get a slew of benefits out of this. So all you need to do is complete this expression of interest. That'll go right to DOE. Someone will get in touch and will get you enrolled in the campaign. All right, next slide. All right, so upcoming events. Our next one is going to be Thursday, March 18th, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And it's basically going to be a recap of these first 5 trainings, the one we just did now, and then the first 4, focusing on these other 4 phases of ESPC that I mentioned. So we're basically going to be taking the highlights out of each of those trainings and put it all into one training session. So if you haven't been able to make the others in the past, right, this will be a great one to attend. So please, when you get this copy of the slides, please click on that link and it'll be a registration to sign up for. Lastly, there's these office hours that we have where you can, sign up with this sign up form here and get myself or a few other project facilitators we have available through DOE to, set up a time. It could be an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever time you need to help you with really whatever regarding ESPC, right? If you have a project you're thinking of doing, you're not sure how to get started. You want to hire an owner's rep, but are not sure how to do that. You've got ESCOs knocking on your door and you're not sure, so how do I handle all this and how do I get something really going? Or you're already in a project and you've got an investment grade audit and you don't really have the time or the staff to answer some of your questions. We can help you with all of that. Or you may have done one and you had some issues and you'd like to get them reconciled. We can help you sort of get on a straight path for that. So really anything you want any help with, we can help you with during this office hours. Next slide. So that is pretty much it. If there's any last questions, please post them. If not, I want to thank our presenters, Dub, George, Tracy, unfortunately couldn't make it, but everyone else for participating. We really value your time. Everyone is very short of time these days, and we hopefully you've gotten something out of this and enjoyed it, and hope to see you again soon in March. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Take care. Bye, everybody.